For more on the election, we welcome to the show Kate Linthicum, Mexico correspondent of the LA Times, to the show. Thanks so much for joining us, Kate. I've been so excited for you to come on with us. You recently wrote an article about AMLO and the election where you talked about his uncanny ability to sway popular opinion, even though his policies have failed to fight poverty and fulfill some of his campaign promises. And this kind of sounds like somebody we know from the United States. Tell us more about what you found out when you were researching that article.
Yeah, I mean, the comparisons with Trump are obvious. Right? This is the person that knows how to connect with the people, how to really portray himself as someone who's close to the people and understands their needs. The interesting thing in this election is if you look at what's happening in Mexico right now, you've had a pandemic that's been badly mishandled, an economy that's doing really poorly, homicides that are at their highest level in years. And yet the president of this country has a 62-63% approval rating. So a lot of people see a disconnect there between what's happening in the country and sort of people's perceptions of AMLO. And what's clear is he's just an incredibly skilled communicator. We see it every single morning, when he talks to the country. And the big question going into Sunday's election is, will people stand by him and stand by his promises for the future? Or will they look at sort of what's happening in the country and decide to go with someone else?
Absolutely. And so as I've been mentioning, the metro collapse, and it's funny because a lot of people don't trust the media, they don't trust the government, but when something is right in front of them and they see it's really affecting. And as you know, in the metro, 5 million people use the metro every day. And so it was a real shocking thing, and especially eroded his core supporters. Have you seen any of that changing and that affecting the outcome of the election?
I don't know that the metro collapse has broadly swayed public opinion. What I noticed is that it was in the news a lot for like 48 hours, and then it sort of disappeared. Other things that a lot of people are paying attention to are, the electoral violence. You've seen somewhere around 80 candidates in local elections being killed around the country. But I don't know. AMLO has staying power. They don't call him the Teflon president for nothing. And I, if I were to give my prediction, I think he's going to outperform on Sunday because the people who support him really support him. And that's partly because he's sort of one of the first candidates ever or one of the first, leaders in this country to talk about poverty in a real way that connects with people. And so I really think that a lot of people will continue to support him. Of course, the interesting thing is he's not even on the ballot, right? It's his party that we're talking about. But Morena, what does it stand for? It stands for AMLO at this point.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's taken over the entire party. While we're talking today, how many different parallels with Donald Trump and what he's been doing with the Republican Party. But one of the things, it's interesting that you say this because in the last show, Agustin Barrios Gomez predicted that he would lose the majority because of the metro collapse and other things, specifically that he was propelled to win in 2018 from the youth vote. And of course, the youth make up a very large percentage of the population here, kind of very different from the United States. And it seems like that it's been eroding support because he has not supported minority groups such as women and the LGBT community as much as they had hoped for, past marijuana legislation, other things that the youth are very, very passionate about.
Yeah, I guess one thing that I always come back to is that I think Mexico is a pretty conservative country, like at its heart. And I think AMLO, who ran as a leftist, but sort of also has a really complicated ideology, right? He's like socially conservative in a lot of ways. He hates the feminist protesters that have been marching against him. He's been kind of like, he doesn't want to weigh in on abortion or same-sex marriage. And I think he gets it. I think that Mexico's a pretty conservative country, and he's kind of like calibrated his views, or maybe they are his views, to meet the audience. And I think people really like respond to that. So I don't know. I just think that there are a lot of people who still feel really passionately about him, despite kind of the shape the country is in, a year and a half into a pandemic that has kind of destroyed the economy in a lot of ways.
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of incumbents are losing in many countries if the people have not found that their COVID response has been successful.
Yeah.
You represent or you're writing for a lot of the diaspora. A lot of Mexicans live in LA and in the area. What we've been noticing is that there's expected to be very low turnout of people in the United States to go and vote, and they can do that in their consulates, etc. What do people feel about the AMLO administration from outside of Mexico? I mean, we know that he has a 62% support, but what are these communities thinking about outside of the country?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I'm not sure I've talked to enough folks about that recently to know exactly sort of where they are.
Right.
I'm sure that those voters are totally informed by the last 4 years of President Trump, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's a pretty interesting kind of political mindset that they have. And I'm sure that that's kind of affecting the way that they view Mexico as well.
Go switch gears for a little bit. We have Kamala Harris's visit just coincidentally 2 days after the election. I'm wondering if you have any scoop or why that happened. But also, there's a lot of issues that are making the relationship a lot tenser than it was under Trump. And what we're surprised about is that these are two ideologues that are very different, Trump and AMLO, but it seemed like they got along much better than he is with the current administration. What are you expecting happening in this in this meeting, this bilateral meeting with Kamala Harris? The director of the CIA is coming down, right? Some other people from the U.S. What do you think's gonna come out of that?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. AMLO has taken kind of a surprisingly pugnacious attitude with the United States. It took him forever to actually recognize AMLO's victory. Biden's victory, for example, after the November elections. And then, yeah, he's called on the U.S. to stop funding or giving funds at all to some of the nonprofits that work on kind of anti-corruption, journalistic type things in Mexico. So it feels like he's kind of cruising for a confrontation, but I think he knows that Biden isn't really the confrontational type. Biden kind of will do whatever he can, I think, to, he's kind of got he's the opposite of Trump, who wanted those big kind of open conflicts. Biden seems to be someone who's much more interested in kind of maintaining, at least the appearance of good relationships. I thought it was really interesting that Biden just today announced that the U.S. is going to be donating a lot of the vaccines that aren't needed in the United States, and that a lot of them are going to go specifically to Mexico. So that's like a total act of goodwill on the part of the Biden administration, despite kind of these moves from AMLO. I think the conversation is going to be interesting, and I think it's largely going to be dictated. This relationship is largely going to be dictated by immigration. Does Mexico continue to cooperate with the United States on stopping immigrants at its southern border? If it does, I think you have a generally pretty happy Biden administration, even if there are concerns there about journalistic freedom, for example, or, sort of the erosion of institutions. And if Mexico doesn't kind of cooperate in that way, I think then you might start to see some kind of more antagonism from the Biden folks as well.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, the new neighbor on the street. It's like old man AMLO down the street. He's like, hey, man, we're trying to do good things for you. We're trying to help. And, he's the guy he was one of the last presidents to acknowledge the Biden administration win. And they keep on making inroads and offers. And he seems to just keep on being angry or not so happy about it.
But it totally works for AMLO because he's a nationalist at heart. Right. And he's super into having an enemy at any given point. Look at his entire political career. He's always the victim of election fraud, or, the mafia de poder. And I think for him, it's kind of convenient, to show that he's willing to stand up to the United States. And it's also part of his, I think, like, political identity. I mean, he thinks that, the neoliberal presidents from the past with NAFTA and other kind of free market reforms, gave up a lot of Mexican sovereignty, to foreign investors and all of that.
Right.
So I think part of it is his DNA, and part of it is it's kind of a good PR move to show yourself standing up to the big mean gringos next door.
Absolutely. And, we'd have Marcelo abroad, running things over in foreign relations. And a lot of people are saying that that's the guy they trust, out of the entire administration. So hopefully we'll have something good, come from that meeting. Kate Linthicum from the LA Times. And Kate, I want to say how grateful we are and how important it is to have the U.S. media and the foreign media here, because of the journalists that are under attack in Mexico. You guys are really working hard to report on the news in a very authentic manner when other people may not be able to do that. So thank you so much for your work and everything you do to tell us what's happening here in the country.
Thank you so much.